You are listening to the Geekly Chronicles.
Now we should have our guest on the phone. If I bring up the right fader here. Hello.
Hello there, how are you?
Oh, very good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for joining us, Lee. It's Catherine here, and we are also joined by...
I'm Kaz.
I'm Chris. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, thank you again for joining us. So I suppose I'd like to know a little bit more about how you got into illustrating comic books.
I guess I'd always drawn from about the age of, since I could grab a pencil, really. I started drawing on floors and walls and annuals. Actually, I've got a lot of annuals from Rupert Bear things like that.
I have Rupert Bear annuals. I love Rupert Bear.
With pictures of spaceships and that kind of stuff on. So
nice.
I was just sort of compelled to draw from an early age. And I started, my mum and dad were they're very indulgent parents, and they bought me loads of comic books, British comics, things like TV Comic and TV 21 and Countdown, all those kind of things that were all kind of based around TV, because TV was the new big thing in the 1950s and 60s. And I was very into things like Fireball XL5 and all Jerry Anderson stuff, and Doctor Who, which became quite a big thing for me. And there were comic strips almost straight away, and I kind of started drawing comic strips for my own amusement, and then eventually it turned into, if you kind of cut to 3 decades later, it turned into what I did for a living.
Wow. So obviously I know you've done Doctor Who, because that's really, I suppose, how I got introduced to you. But what other franchises have you drawn comic strips and art for?
It's funny because when franchises is a great word for it, and it's exactly right, but it was kind of a bit of a dirty word, and I was starting. people kind of get it now, but I think we were all looked down on by a lot of the industry professionals when we started getting into that stuff. The first thing I did was Transformers. Which was at the height of its popularity in about 1988, something like that, 89. That's when I started drawing comic strips, and I couldn't figure them out at all. I still don't really quite understand them, but I'm not sure why they are in disguise. But and also I just couldn't get a handle on the fact that they changed size as well. So you had someone
That's
like
a very good point.
Megatron, who turned into a small Walther P38 pistol,
yes,
or a 60-foot robot or 30-foot, whatever.
The physics of that universe is just all wrong.
I could never quite understand. It was either an extremely heavy pistol or a very lightweight robot. I couldn't figure that out.
I think there's something dimensionally transcendental
I got some Transformers, and that was a great starting point. I went straight away. Well, actually, I did, pausing to do 3 pictures for Thundercats, which has marked me as a Thundercats artist forevermore. I did 3 covers for the Thundercats series. Then I went straight into Doctor Who, and that was a franchise I really wanted to be part of, and luckily it's kind of bounced around ever since. But after that, I did RoboCop. Then another franchise was for William Shatner. He had a series of novels and a TV series and the comic, and I did the comic, which was cool because he rang me up a couple of times.
Excellent.
So there were those
so
things,
cool.
but also things like Judge Dredd. I mean, that's just as much a franchise. They're all, unless you've actually made it up yourself. And I'm currently working on Rivers of London, which is, again, a franchise. That's Ben Aronovich's franchise, and I'm hanging onto his coattails with the kind of grip of a crazed zombie.
Yeah, so I've seen obviously Rivers of London coming up on your Twitter and Facebook and things, but it's not something I know much about. What is Rivers of London about?
Well, I'm terribly pleased to have the opportunity to tell you. It's basically a series of novels that Ben Aronovich, who was a Doctor Who writer back in Sylvester McCoy's time, and he's authored these, I think there are 5 novels out now, a 6th one is coming out. They are fantasy, police, procedural, supernatural thrillers. So they're grounded very heavily in reality, except when people start talking to dead people. And there is the protagonist is a young UK cop who is just happens to be able to summon magical powers, and he's put into training by the only other wizard in the Metropolitan Police.
The only other wizard in the Metropolitan Police.
It's much grimmer than it sounds, and it's much funnier as well.
No, I think it sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll have to check this out. So what's the first
I
Rivers
hope
of
I've
London
sold
book
that well to
called?
you. And the comics are basically, they run alongside the books. Ben is also writing the comics along with Andrew Cartmel, who's also Doctor Who script editor from back in the day and a big pal of Ben's. And they have created the comic book series, which fits in between some of the novels. And the one we're doing, the second story, which we're working on now, is a prequel to the next novel, which is coming out. So they're actually locked into continuity and canon. So although people may disagree with the way I draw them, possibly, they are actually part of the series. So we're all very pleased with that.
Yeah,
I do like it when all
great.
I do like it when all the different things like the comic books and novels and all different kind of formats for a particular franchise all fit together in canon, which is the thing I enjoy.
It's very satisfying.
It's quite rare for it to happen, really, because all the other things I've worked on have been, they're kind of alternate universe stories, really, I suppose. Things like, if you pick up a Doctor Who comic or Star Trek or whatever, they can't affect the TV program or the film series at all. They're not considered to be canon, even though they can be as accurate and dovetail into the series as possible and feed off the series. They can't go back into the series. That just generally doesn't happen. So it's rather nice to be working on something which is properly locked in.
Okay. I was very sort of unsure about how it worked with Doctor Who. I mean, it seems like everything in Doctor Who is sort of a little bit of a kind of a fudge.
Yeah.
Just sort of crowbar something in here.
It's got to be the advantage of a universe like Doctor Who, where you can, things like Time Order are a bit more wibbly wobbly, I suppose, to borrow a phrase. So it's got to be much easier for that. But I'm such a huge fan of continuity. I think any story, no matter how ridiculous, any story can be believable if continuity is used well. So I'm pleased to hear that. Pleased to hear that things can work out well in that respect.
Well, I know I worked on a Doctor Who story a long time ago. Actually, 2 Dalek stories, which featured Absalom Dark, who's a big hit with some of the comics readers. And the second one was a continuity fest. It was a way of trying to tie all the previous contradictory Davros stories together with the Daleks, and from things from John Pertwee's time, and it was set in the Dalek city back in Skaro from the first story, and there were tons of stuff was tried to shoveled in there. I don't know how Paul managed it, but it was just every page was another continuity thing cleared up.
It must be hard when there's so many
incidentally, as a strange coincidence, the first story of Absalom Dark that I did, a picture from that appeared in Time Heist, which was Peter Capaldi's first series. And it flashes up for a second on the screen, and that's the only time that's ever happened in Doctor Who that the comic strip has gone back into the series. Wow. And it just happens to be my picture. It was a character created by Steve Dillon, actually, and it was he should have had the credits for that, but I was the only person who drew him straight on, so he looked like he was in a mugshot, which is why it was used.
I must ask, did you know they were going to do that before they did it, or did you just see it on TV like, that's mine?
Well, I didn't even see it on TV, but I got into a hailstorm of Facebook and Twitter stuff saying Absalom Dark is on next week's Doctor Who, because it was in the next week slot as well. And then it said, your Absalom Dark is on next week. And I was back from a music gig quite late, and I had to kind of sit down and watch the episode to try and figure out what they were talking about. And no, I didn't know anything about it. I've never had any contact with them, so I've no idea why that got there, but I guess it's just one of those lovely in-jokes.
Mm. Wow, I need to go back and rewatch that now.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, it lasts almost a second. Blink and you miss it.
Well, for screen time, though, that's quite impressive.
This is true.
It's longer than I've been on Doctor Who.
It's a 30-year career condensed into less than a second.
Yes.
It's quite remarkable. But yeah, a guy plugs. There's a guy who has a computer interface in his skull, and he plugs himself into a screen, and these images, some of which are kind of jokey images of old Doctor Who enemies, just pop up, and that's one of them. And it's just a drawing. It's not. They don't even try to make it look like it's not a drawing. So it's very pleasing, but also rather bonkers.
Yes,
I think I remember the moment. I'm going go back and check it out.
Yeah.
So you've never spoken to the Doctor Who people, but you said you've spoken to William Shatner on the phone. I can't let that pass without asking how was that? How is a phone conversation with William Shatner?
Well, it's oh God, you've really opened up a can of worms. People who know the story know that it goes on for hours, but I'll do a condensed version. I was working on Tech World, which was his baby, and it was about virtual reality, a drug, a virtual reality kind of. Well, I suppose it was a mechanical device that you got addicted to, basically, and the private detective who's framed and all the rest of it. Character called Jake Cardigan, a name that only William Shatner could arrive at. I'm a huge Star Trek and Captain Kirk in particular fan, so I was very thrilled to be working on it. And I knew he was looking at the stuff and vetting it, and I thought, well, I used to retire to bed at the end of the working day and sort of giggle internally, obviously, because it'd be a bit worrying for my wife otherwise, about the fact that he was kind of looking at this stuff. And then I went out to the shops one day, and I came back, having bought some fine groceries, to find a message on my answer machine, and I played it, and it said, "Lee, this is William Shatner, calling you from New York. I'd like to talk to you about some changes I'd like you to do for the comic book. I love your work. I'll get back to you. I'm leaving here now. I'll get back to you soon."
Brilliant.
I hope you saved that message.
It's out there somewhere. Yeah, I've got it somewhere. I almost daren't look for it, because if it wasn't there, I'd have to die. I'd have to kill myself. But it was from the time. It's a long time ago. It was actual music cassette, in the answer machine. So I was able to take it out and put another one in. So I sat by my phone for about 2.5 weeks, and no phone calls came in. And finally, we needed more food, so I went to the shop. Again, I came back. Once again, there was an answer machine light blinking. "Lee, I missed you again." And so really like to talk to you. So maybe we can arrange that. So I thought, I'm not having any more of this. So I managed within, and this is a sort of desperation. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to get him on the phone in about 5 minutes. I managed to remember that his production company was called Lemley, and I managed to get that number, and I just went straight through to his secretary, who said, "Oh, right, okay, here he is." And then I spent the most peculiar 5 minutes talking to him, because I couldn't think of any connected words that I could use in a sentence. So it's and I've recorded that conversation too, and it's very stilted on my side.
I think I'd been the same. I'd have been the same.
Yeah.
"Call me Bill," he said. And so we talked, and it was great, and I basked in it. And then he said, "So, if you're passing, it'd be great to see you. I'm directing the TV movies, so why don't you stop by and we'll sync a few.
Oh my word!
Wow.
I don't know what your reaction to that would be, but mine was to get the first available flight.
Yes, that would be mine too.
Yeah, that
yeah.
would be mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I'm always passing Toronto on the way somewhere else. And
It's on my commute into London.
and
Aren't we all?
so I went out there and I watched him directing, and he was really nice. And I spent about 2 or 3 days, knocking around the set. We went out for dinner, and he's what Shatner's. I'm starting to sound like him now. You know what Shatner's
You've caught it.
thing is. And you know his reputation, but he was not like that at all. He was an interested, quiet, introverted kind of guy, and that was a real surprise. Except for one evening when we were sitting in the back of what was a very new thing in those days called people carriers, right? So they kind of looked vaguely futuristic and shuttlecrafty. And I was sitting in the back of the car next to him. I'd gone out there with my lovely writer friend Evan Skolnick, who was also editor at the time, and we were just kind of soaking up all the new stuff and the TV series to try and put it into the comic book. But I just turned. He was taking the mickey out of my English accent, and he was going that kind of stuff. And I was thinking, well, you can talk. But I was also just looked at him, and it's Kirk's profile. He's one of the most, literally iconic. People know what he looks like everywhere. And yet he walked 2 or 3 miles from his hotel every morning to the set, And we walked up and down the street, and he kind of nodded to people if they kind of did a double take on him. It was the most interesting experience,
Yeah.
Almost kind of an anti-celebrity celebrity.
Yeah, it was an interesting. Well, because I already knew, because there's all this stuff about Star Trek, and did they get on, didn't they get on? The whole industry that some of the others have kind of built up of We Hate Bill, and we kept asking people on the set, all the production people and the guys working in the editing room. He took us around the whole thing, showed us into the editing suite, and they did a bit of editing while we were there. That was all digital. I couldn't believe it. It was so advanced this is probably all before all of you were born, but they were kind of using digital editing techniques, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I would ask these people, and they would say, wow, we've heard stories, but he's been great with us. So interesting.
And I really like the fact that you think we're so young. So thank you. That's a real compliment.
Everybody is very young to me. I come from the past.
I think we all come from the past.
Yeah.
But we used to dodge dinosaurs on the way to school.
Well, no wonder you're so creative.
Yeah, we were fast. We were creative, but we were fast.
You and Shatner dodging dinosaurs. Now that is a comic book I would read.
Yes.
You and Shatner dodging dinosaurs. I would love that.
Well,
one.
the thing is, he'll always outlast me. So he's got. It's unbelievable. He's still. I think he's 85 now, something like that.
William Shatner's going to outlast all of us. At the end of the world, it'll just be cockroaches, Twinkies, and William Shatner.
William Shatner will
I know.
always be.
I really genuinely think he has a good chance of that happening, because he has no intention of slowing down and letting anyone like death catch up with him. He's just an extraordinary individual. He's just absolutely, he does all the stuff, and he's doing bits and pieces. You can see it tweets 1 million times a day. I hope he's got an assistant doing that, because I can't imagine him doing it himself. But it's, he's just full of energy and lots of projects, and he rides horses, and he's endlessly doing stuff. Can't imagine he just doesn't touch the ground.
Well,
great privilege to have met him.
He's going to be here in the UK in October. Is it October for the 50th anniversary
convention
that certainly we will be at, which would be quite fun.
Oh gosh, well, you say hello from me.
Yeah,
If we get some
him.
FaceTime, I think we'll be competing with a lot of other people to try and see William Shatner over there.
Although, seems
Well,
like
we traded. It was kind of nice because we traded Christmas cards and stuff for about 3 or 4 years afterwards. And then I think, sadly, that his wife at the time, she died in a drowning accident, and that was the end of. I think that was kind of like the cut-off, and so we no longer trade Christmas cards. But hey, I've got a few knocking around the house.
That's not bad at all.
It's wonderful when your work leads you to these magical sort of things to happen.
Yeah,
love that. So not to let William Shatner kind of take over the whole interview, I just want to ask you one more thing. If you could draw anything in the future, what would you want to draw? What universe would you want to be a part of?
I think that William Shatner and me dodging the dinosaurs comic sounds good.
You can have that one.
I think there's some mileage in that. The one thing that's kind of got away from me, I've been very, very lucky, and I've worked on lots of things that I wanted to do, Thunderbirds and all that kind of. Forgot to mention those earlier. Did 5 years of Thunderbirds. Kind of a sentence. And I've worked on all kinds of things. I would like to have worked on Iron Man. I was always very jealous of my contemporary Kev Hopgood, who went off to work on Iron Man while I was working on those American things. I think Kev was working on Iron Man, and he created War Machine, and
that's amazing.
I would have loved to have had a crack at Iron Man. That kind of suits me. That mechanical exoskeleton thing I really like. And of course, now you probably can't move for people trying to draw an Iron Man because of the movies, which I love. And I have a lovely Hot Toys Iron Man sitting on my desk looking balefully at me right now.
In really the way that only Tony Stark can.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the Geekly Chronicles.